So, good day, ma'am. Good day, classmates. Today we will be discussing the chapter 4 entitled Of Test and Testing. In the field of psychology, there are important questions that is hard to uncover. It needs higher thinking skills for us to understand and answer it. However, we have the so-called tests that address this kind of questions, which may give relevant answers and carries favorable impact on many lives. So first, let us know what is the use of tests. Test has been used in different fields of professions, but is more useful in helping professions, such as in the field of psychology. Test was used to evaluate the person's skills, capability, and even understanding of individuals' characteristics and behaviors. There are different kinds of tests, such as personality tests, motivation tests, and situational judgment tests, and it depends on what it is intended for. So, the objectives in this chapter is to overview the elements of a good test. And as a background, we begin by listing some basic assumptions about assessment. Some assumptions about psychological testing and assessment. So first, let's go to the first assumption. Assumption 1. Psychological traits and states exist. So first, let's define what is trait and states. Trait has been defined as distinguishable relatively enduring way in which one individual varies from another, while states also distinguish one person from another but are relatively less enduring. So basically, traits and state was used to describe the unique characteristic of the individual. But trait is relatively enduring. When we say relatively enduring, it can be used in a long period of time. However, states are relatively less enduring, in which it can be used temporarily. So the trait term that an observer applies is based on observing a sample of behavior. Examples of behavior may be obtained in a number of ways, ranging from direct observation to the analysis of self-report, statements, or pencils and paper test answers, or can be produced by any test. So here comes the term psychological trait. Much like the term trait alone covers a wide range of possible characteristics. Thousands of psychological trait terms can be found in the English language. So as the world evolves, nag-arise po ang bag-ong terms and psychological traits terms. So for example, before 1960s, ang mga babae is known to be conservative, in which dili sila kayo ga-interact sa mga lalaki, o more likely ang ilang dress code is dili revealing. But in 1960s, they change or nag-changes or nag-evolve ang mga from dili revealing na dress to revealing na dress, and less interaction with man to more interactive sa mga lalaki. So, dara na ni-rise ang word nga liberated, in which it defined as the freed from the constraints of gender-dependent social expectations. So, cultural evolution may bring new trait terms in a common usage. Among them are psychological traits that relates to intelligence, specific intellectual abilities, cognitive style, adjustment, interests, attitudes, sexual orientation and preferences, psychopathology, personality in general, and specific personality traits. So, few people deny that psychological traits exist, yet there has been a fair amount of controversy regarding just how they exist. So, there are arguments or controversy on nag-exist ba jud daw ang psychological traits. Nag-ingon nga wala, and there are some nga nag-ingon nga they exist. Some have argued in favor of such a conceptions of psychological traits. Compelling evidence to support such a view has been difficult to obtain. So, naay questions nga nag-circulates about psychological traits. So, do traits have a physical existence, perhaps as a circuits in the brain? So, here comes the word construct. For purposes, a psychological trait exists only as a construct, an informed scientific concept developed or constructed to describe or explain behavior. So, dito makita, dito siya madunggan, o dito siya magunitan ang construct. But, we can infer their existence from overt behavior. So, unsa man yung overt behavior? Overbehavior refers to the observable actions or the products of an observable actions including tests or assessment-related response. So, ang overt behavior daw is maproduce siya through test or assessments-related response. So, for example, kaning challenge-facing test. So, a challenge-facing test developers is to construct tests that are at least as telling observable behavior such as illustrated in 4.1. So, dariya ang bungee jumping test. So, ang test taker is kaning taong nga mo-undergo aning bungee jumping in which tanawon ng ilang behavior before, during, and after. So, dito kung sa ang behavior na ginapakita nila, ginadescribe dito and that behavior is the overt behavior. So, the phrase relatively enduring in our definition of trait is to remind that a trait is not expected to be manifested in behavior 100% of the time. The definitions of trait and state we are using also refers to a way in which one individual varies from another. Attributions of a trait or state term are relative. The context within which behavior occurs also plays a role in helping us select appropriate terms for observed behavior. So, dako po daw og impact ang context in describing traits or maghatag og appropriate nga traits sa ka-behavior. So, for example, hindi makita tag tao sa church nga kanang nagluhod tapos ang kamot is murag nag-hold to each other. So, we can infer or we can describe them or we can give them a trait that they are religious. Diba? Kasama sa simbahan tapos what do we call this? Nagkneeling, then silang kamot, something nagpray. So, we can infer them as or we can describe them as religious. But, if makita tag tao sa gymnasium na nagtanaw og kami tag kanang volleyball league, then basta siya nga nag-kneel, then nag-holding hands and praying position. So, we can describe or infer na kato siya is na paranoid or na-intensify ang iyang self tungod sa dula. We can see him as religious kasi wala man sa simbahan. So, context within which behavior occurs also plays a role in helping us select appropriate traits terms for observed behavior. So let's proceed to assumption 2. Psychological traits and states can be quantified and measured. So once it's acknowledged that psychological traits and states do exist, the specific traits and states to be measured and quantified needs to be carefully defined. Test developers and researchers, much like people in general, have many different ways of looking at and defining the same phenomenon. So for example, aggressiveness. So, dahil mga tao na ginadefine kung unsa aggressiveness. Pwede nga mayroon sila aggressive ang isa katao kay serial killer, nagdala siya kutsilyo, and we can say aggressive ang isa katao kay clingy sa imuha, so aggressive siya kay at kayo sige ra sa imuha, or we can say nga aggressive ang isa katao kay kanang dili ka puyo. So dagag pwede na-define ang aggressive. So as a test taker or as a test user or developers, it is important nga imuha jung i-clarify kung unsa ang definition sa imuhang test or mag-evaluate na ka sa scores. It is important nga kabalo jud kung unsa jud ang correct definition ana parang or mga terminology sa imuhang test. So, measuring traits and states by means of a test entails developing not only appropriate test items but also appropriate ways to score the test and interpret the results. The test score is presumed to represent the strength of the targeted ability or trait or states. It is frequently based on cumulative scoring. So, cumulative scoring in which kung asa ang mas daghan or asa mas majority ang imong mga answer, kuntahay naka-test na ginatake. Tapos isa sa mga traits ay twice shyness, na ay kanang what we call this, na ay kanang aggressiveness. So if ang imuhang answers is more likely nakalinya sa shyness. Therefore, ang imuhang traits or ang imuhang dominant traits is shy ka nga tao. So, nagabit siya sa cumulative scoring. So, cumulative scoring is the assumption that the more that the test takers responds in a particular direction as keyed by the test manual as correct or consistent with a particular trait, the higher the test taker is presumed to be on the targeted ability or trait. So, in the language of psychological testing and assessment, the word domain is substituted for the world in this context. Assessment professionals speak, for example, of domain sampling, which may refers either a sample of behaviors from all possible behaviors that could conceivably be indicative of a particular constructor, or 2, a sample of test items from all possible items that could conceivably be used to measure a particular construct. So, other models of scoring are discussed in Chapter 8. So, let's go to the assumption 3. Test-related behavior predicts non-test-related behavior. The objectives of such a test typically has little to do with the predicting future grid blackening or capricing behavior. Rather, the objectives of the test is to provide some indication of other aspects of the examiner's behavior. The task in some tests mimic the actual behavior that the test user is attempting to understand. So, tests can be used as a future prediction, and mostly it was used in a workplace wherein, for example, the human resource team will evaluate every results from the job takers and use it as a reference of the job takers, or if the job takers are qualified to that kind of jobs. So, in some forensic or legal matters, psychological tests may be used not to predict behavior but to post-dig. So, post-dig means that is to aid in the understanding of behavior that has already taken place. So, text or assessment can be used in different way like post-diction. For example, there may be a need to understand a criminal defender's states of mind at the time of commission of a crime. It is beyond the capability of any known testing assessments procedures to reconstruct someone's states of mind.